You're listening to the Telltale channel. Don't forget to check me out on all social media: Patreon, Twitter, Teespring, and Etsy. All links can be found in the description or on my website, telltaleatheist.com. Hey, this is Owen. If you're comfortable, leave your first name and state at the sound of the tiny truck backing up.
Hey, this is Andre from Michigan. I was just wondering, how would a Mormon missionary or some elders take to objective scientific evidence disproving their faith? I watched your Mormon reacting to South Park video, and I thought it was pretty interesting how she was trying to kind of cover the tracks blindly. And just, hypothetically speaking, if elders were to come to my door and I presented them with concrete evidence that it was all BS, how would they take it, and how could I convince them that they were wrong and they're believing in something that's a cult, they're following a bunch of charlatans saying so and love the content?
Extremely interesting question. So to summarize, basically, if Mormon elders come to your door and you provide this solid, indisputable, objectively true information that disproves the claims that the Mormon Church makes, how would they react? So I think my guess would be, if you push hard enough, then they're going to say that you're an apostate and a lost cause, and they're just going to leave and just call it there. If you presented it in a more mild, non-confrontational way, they'd probably try to come up with explanations or reasons or answers for it. And when you just say that's just factually incorrect, like there's no evidence for what you're saying here at all, in fact, there's evidence against it, they may say, well, we'll just have to research it a little bit more. We'll look it up and we'll get back to you. Of course, they'll never get back to you. They may not even ever look it up. But I don't want to leave the question there, because there is more to this. Last week, I talked about the CES letter, how there were just knockout punches, questions that simply cannot be answered by the Mormon Church. Objective facts that disprove their claims, period. No questions asked. But, interestingly enough, there is something called debunking the CES letter. It's a Mormon response to CES letter questions. And I don't think this is an official thing exactly. I think this is like an unofficial apologetics type of thing. But it is very, very interesting. So let's just take a short look. I don't want to spend too much time on it because we do have a lot of voicemails to get to. But let's take a quick glance at this and see what it is. So last week on the podcast, we talked about the Book of Abraham and the many problems with the Book of Abraham. Like the fact that he did get these hieroglyphics, that is factual. He had these hieroglyphics. But we know what these hieroglyphics were. We know what they looked like. Parts of the hieroglyphics were kind of decayed and broken away. So Joseph Smith filled in the parts that were broken with his own drawings, what he was claiming that God was providing to him. We just know that that's factually incorrect. That is not what they look like, period. So this is the CES letter response. Let's look at what it says here. There's only one short section on the Book of Abraham. They don't even address all of the questions in the CES letter, and it's kind of scattershot too. It's all over the place. So let's just start at the top here and see what it says. This is from the original CES letter. Despite Joseph Smith's claim that this record was written by Abraham by his own hand upon papyrus, scholars have found the original papyrus Joseph Smith translated and have dated it in the 1st century CE, nearly 2,000 years after Abraham could have written it. They dated the papyrus 2,000 years younger than Joseph Smith claims it was. So here is the Mormon response to that. The phrase by his own hand, quote unquote, upon papyrus refers to the original record, which may have been recopied multiple times. It needn't refer to anything more than original authorship. Okay, let's just take this one claim at a time. It didn't say anything like what he claimed it said, okay? It said nothing like that. We can throw that entire idea out from the get-go. It was not Abraham. He did not write it. It didn't even contain the name Abraham in it. Had nothing to do with Abraham. Let's just continue on from there. Let's see what else it says. This is from the CES letter again. Egyptologists have found the source material for the Book of Abraham to be nothing more than a common pagan Egyptian funerary text for a deceased man named Hor in 1st century CE. In other words, it was a common breathing permit that the Egyptians buried with their dead. It has absolutely nothing to do with Abraham or anything Joseph claimed in his translation for the Book of Abraham. Now, here's the response to that. Here's the debunk, quote unquote, for that. The church has long acknowledged that the recovered fragments of the Joseph Smith papyri are not the Book of Abraham, but instead are copies of the Book of Breathings and the Book of the Dead. The discovery was celebrated on the cover of the Improvement Era, January 1968. Okay, now, I don't think that that's what they claim. I don't think the Mormon Church claims that. Even if the Mormon Church doesn't accept that these are the hieroglyphics that Joseph Smith was translating from, they just were. I mean, we have the drawings here. We can look at the drawings here. So this is a funerary text. This picture that I'm highlighting here, this is the funerary breathing permit that would go in people's tombs, basically, when they died. It was a picture of this jackal-like creature over top of this person with the birds and everything else. That's what it looked like. That's what it looked like. What breathing permits looked like. We have like a billion examples of these. This right here, what we're looking at, is the physical papyrus that Joseph Smith had. And we can see it's missing the jackal's head. It's missing the center of the body. It's missing the bird's head. It's missing the bird completely on the left side here. And guess what? What do we find? The facsimiles that Joseph Smith drew fill in the exact gaps that were missing from the original that we found in that museum. Everything is exactly the same in Joseph Smith's facsimiles, except for the missing pieces, like the decayed parts that are missing. Those are the only differences in the facsimiles, and they're just wrong. It's nonsensical. To look at what Joseph Smith drew here in the facsimiles, it's completely nonsensical. Does not make any sense. In the language that Egyptians used, it doesn't make any sense. So this defense of the book of Abraham that's being provided here in the debunk of the CES letter is based on a complete misunderstanding of how hieroglyphics work, like on the most basic level, and a refusal to see just factual information right in front of you. Let's continue reading this and see what it says here. From the CES letter, the following is a side-by-side comparison of what Joseph Smith translated in facsimile 1 versus what he actually says according to Egyptologists and modern Egyptology. Last week, we pulled this up and we looked at it. Joseph Smith's interpretation of what the words said were the angel of the Lord. Abraham fastened upon the altar the idolatrous priest of Elkanah, the idolatrous god of Elkanah, the idolatrous god of Libnah, things like that. Where in reality, what it actually said was the spirit or Ba of Hor, the deceased. His name was Hor. Anubis, a common funeral bier or lion couch. This is the god Horus. I mean, completely different, like not the same in any way, shape, or form, right? So here's the defense of Mormonism against this section of the CES letter. When it says here, the following is a side-by-side comparison of what Joseph Smith translated, the word translated is circled, and they have a defense of the word translated here. Their defense says, the CES letter ignores the fact that Joseph Smith never claimed to translate like modern translators. Translation for Joseph Smith occurred as he reviewed texts like the Old Testament and revealed the Book of Moses. Okay. So what they're saying is that Joseph Smith interpreted the book, not translated. We're misusing the word translate. They're changing the meaning and the definition of words. Look, if Joseph Smith claims to have gotten this piece of papyrus and taken words from it and given us the meaning of those words, what he was doing was he was translating it. That's what he was doing. That's what he was claiming. And he was completely wrong. So their defense is, what they're saying is Joseph Smith took this funerary breathing permit, this Egyptian funerary text, and even though it said something completely different, completely unrelated to what he was claiming it said, the message was still coming from God. So he could have taken Moby Dick and in French and come up with the Book of Abraham, and it would have been perfectly valid. That's basically what they're saying here. Next, they've circled the part where it's basically the list of words that Joseph Smith translated and the actual translations. So they've circled that section, basically what Joseph Smith got wrong. And here's their response to it. This assumes that Joseph Smith translates the papyri in the same way as modern Egyptologists, which is a false assumption. The differences shown on these graphics only validate that reality and are not unexpected. Joseph Smith could only translate through the gift and power of God, and his revelatory translations may require time to understand. For example, many things in the book of Revelation are not completely understood, even by the best biblical scholars today. So basically what they're saying is, yeah, we know Joseph Smith didn't translate the book exactly. It's not word for word what the thing said. We know it was a breathing permit from Egypt. We know it didn't have anything to do with Abraham. We know it didn't say anything about him. We know it wasn't written by him. But Joseph Smith could have taken a piece of tree bark and translated, quote unquote, the Book of Abraham for it because God was telling him what to say. So in the end, this funerary text is completely irrelevant. We didn't even need it. Joseph Smith could have just told us what the Book of Abraham said. And if that's the case, why did he claim that he was translating directly from this funerary text? Or why did he lie about what this thing said? It's just a piss-poor defense of Mormonism here. Seriously, it's a piss-poor defense. I'm sorry. I can't accept it. Back to the voicemail question. In the end, I would say they're probably just going to deny it and say it was a misunderstanding and that they'll get back to you. That's probably what they would do.